My husband sent me divorce papers while he was hosting a dinner party in our house with his secretary. My boss told me to leave the office because I was causing a scene. His secretary handed me my own wedding ring and said, "You won't be needing this anymore." Meanwhile, my name was removed from our deed without my consent. In return, 7 days later, they were banned from the building I now owned. I met Callum Roth at a fundraiser for Habitat for Humanity in downtown Seattle, one of those networking with a cause events where half the room is there for the free wine. He was tall, well-dressed, and had the kind of dry wit that makes you think he's read more than he actually has. He wasn't loud, but when he spoke, people leaned in. I did too. He worked in finance. I was an architect, mid-level at a firm trying to find its footing in a city full of cranes and condos. We hit it off quickly. He was charming, attentive. Our dates were full of ambition, talking about future travel, business dreams, our shared desire to stay child-free by choice. For once, it felt like I wasn't the one bending to make someone else comfortable. 2 years later, we were married. Bought a 3-story colonial in Queen and with wraparound windows and views of Elliott Bay. It was everything I dreamed of, except maybe him. He was changing already. Gone longer, distracted even when he was home. He said it was stress from work. I accepted that. You don't question the person who smiles and kisses your forehead while you're still holding the grocery bags. I should have paid more attention to the details. Like how he started locking his phone when he never used to. Or how Lara, his new executive assistant, was suddenly always around. Or how his wardrobe started shifting, more expensive, more intentional, even though he claimed to be budgeting tighter. I remember the day I met her. Lara was poised, thin in that way that made other women self-conscious without her trying. The kind of woman who seems to always be in control of her body, her words, and everyone else's gaze. Her handshake was cold. Her eyes were colder. "She's great," Callum had said. "Can't imagine keeping my schedule straight without her." That should have been the first red flag. The second was when I got a call from our bank asking to confirm a withdrawal I never made, a large one. I confronted Callum. He brushed it off as a business move. Said he was shuffling funds for a new investment opportunity. "Nothing to worry about," he said. I believed him. Because I wanted to. Then I found a letter from our real estate attorney in the mail, addressed only to Callum, referencing an updated deed for our home. My name wasn't on it. I had never signed anything. I emailed the attorney. He replied, as discussed, the forms were signed and processed last month. But I hadn't discussed anything. I hadn't signed a single page. I brought it up to Callum that night over dinner. He didn't deny it. Just looked at me like I was a gnat buzzing too close to his ear. "It's cleaner this way," he said. "You've always hated dealing with house paperwork." It was like he'd already moved on, emotionally. I felt like I was standing in a room that had already been packed up, just no one told me. Still, nothing prepared me for that Thursday. I was at work, staying late to finish a proposal for a housing development project in Tacoma. I got the email at 6:12 p.m. It was from a private legal office. The subject line read, "Petition for divorce, Callum Roth versus Mira Roth." I stared at it for so long, I didn't hear Maureen, my boss, walk over. "Mira. I think it's best if you head home early tonight," she said gently. I blinked. "Why?" "There's been a complaint. Something about a disturbance." I looked around. I hadn't spoken to anyone for hours. "I think you know what this is about," she added softly. "Just take the night. Please." So I left. Drove home with a pit in my stomach, heart in my throat. The sky was gray, that dull, heavy Seattle gray that makes the streets look like they're coated in silver dust. When I walked through the front door, everything felt off. There was laughter coming from the dining room. The scent of roasted lamb and expensive wine hung in the air. And there they were, Callum, Lara, and 6 of his work friends, mid-toast. My entrance didn't even cause a stir. No one stood up. No one asked how I was. They just looked, mildly inconvenienced. Callum stood, walked over to me, and said, "So, you got the email." I couldn't speak. Then Lara, calm as ever, walked up and placed a tiny box into my hand. Inside was my wedding ring. "You won't be needing this anymore," she said. Like she was handing me my coat from the coat check. I left without another word. Drove to a hotel and checked in with whatever clothes I had in my trunk from a postponed gym session. That was the lowest night of my life. But it was also the beginning of something else. I spent that first night at the Watertown Hotel near University District. It was a place I'd stayed once years ago when our water heater broke in the middle of winter. Funny how I ended up back there again, this time broken in a different way. I sat on the bed in silence, just me, the sound of traffic, and a cheap bottle of rose from the corner store. I kept opening the little velvet box over and over, staring at that ring like it was going to explain something. I didn't cry that night. Not because I wasn't devastated, I was. But something else was there, humming just beneath the pain. Not rage, not yet. But awareness. That kind of electric clarity that makes everything sharper. It's like my mind had been foggy for so long and now the fog was burning off, revealing the wreckage for what it really was. By the next morning, I had forwarded the divorce papers to a lawyer, a woman named Brenna Coates, recommended by a friend I hadn't spoken to in years but suddenly remembered in the middle of the night. She picked up on the first ring. Calm. Efficient. The kind of woman who had definitely been through her own hell and learned how to make maps out of it. "This is going to get ugly," she warned, after scanning the documents. "He's already moved financial assets. He's trying to get ahead of you." I told her about the house. The missing name on the deed. The sudden disappearance of bank records. There was a long pause. Then, "Mira, this wasn't impulsive. He's been planning this for months." That's when something clicked. Because she was right. The paperwork, the timing, the party, it wasn't chaos. It was a well-oiled machine of betrayal. And I had been asleep at the wheel. The thing is, Callum had underestimated me. Everyone always had, in small ways. I was the quiet one. The stable wife. The behind-the-scenes girl. But what Callum forgot, what Laura never knew, was that while they were building their shiny little affair, I had been building something else. See, a few years back, I joined a real estate investment group. It started as a side interest, a quiet venture with a couple of friends from grad school. We pooled resources and began acquiring small commercial properties around Seattle. Office spaces. Shared work lofts. Parking structures. Nothing flashy, but steady. One of those properties, as fate would have it, was a historic brick building downtown on Spring Street, just a few blocks from Pike Place. We'd acquired it right before COVID, renovated during the shutdown, and released it as soon as restrictions eased. It turned into our most valuable asset. And guess who had moved their office into that very building? Roth and Company. Yup. Callum's company. At the time, it was just a funny coincidence. He never asked about my investments. I never offered details. Our finances were separate, as he always liked to say. That line, "let's keep things clean," used to bother me. Now, it was the greatest gift he could have given me. Because the building? The one his firm signed a 5-year lease on? I had just finalized full ownership of it a week prior to the divorce notice. Technically, it belonged to an LLC under my name. That realization hit me over oatmeal in the hotel breakfast lounge. The same place two toddlers were fighting over the waffle machine while their dad tried desperately to scroll emails. It was such a normal moment, and yet I was sitting there plotting like a Bond villain in yoga pants and a hoodie. I called Brenna again. "Is it legal to terminate a lease early if I own the property?" "Depends on the contract," she said. "But if you're the sole owner, you can do plenty." I spent the next 2 days with her and my investment partners combing through the lease, looking for the soft spots. And we found one. There was a clause that allowed termination if the tenant had violated ethical provisions tied to their operation, part of a community engagement clause we had snuck in to encourage socially responsible business use of the space. Normally, this was a non-issue. But Callum had used company funds, as confirmed by a whistleblower email Brenna received from an anonymous staffer, to finance travel expenses that had nothing to do with work. Multiple trips. Lavish hotels. Dinners in Napa. All booked under Roth and Company, all with Lara. That was more than enough. The same night I confirmed the violation, I visited the building. Not for confrontation, for inspection. Quietly. Like a landlord checking the plumbing. I even brought one of my partners with me to avoid suspicion. I stood in the same elevator Callum probably used every morning, stared at the same glass walls Lara likely posed against for her filtered working late selfies, and felt nothing. No sadness. Just readiness. I wasn't going to scream at them. I wasn't going to fight dirty. I was going to end it clean. Just like he always liked things. 3 days later, we served the notice to vacate. It was delivered by courier, straight to the front desk, with a copy emailed to both Callum and his legal team. Subject line: Notice of lease termination due to ethics clause breach. They had 72 hours to clear out. The fallout began faster than I expected. It started with a flood of phone calls. First, from an unfamiliar number. Then another. And another. I didn't answer any of them. I let them stack up like unanswered voicemails were some sort of emotional debt he now had to carry instead of me. Eventually, Callum sent an email with the subject line, "We need to talk." No greeting. No apology. Just, "This is going too far. You're making this personal when it doesn't have to be. Let's be civil and figure this out." I sat back and stared at it for a long time. My mind went back to the dinner party. The ring box. Lara's expression, that perfect, detached smirk, like this was just another boardroom negotiation. The man who'd blindsided me with divorce papers, locked me out of my own finances, and erased my name from the home we built, was now asking me to be civil. I didn't respond. Instead, I instructed the property manager, Alan, a quiet, meticulous guy who ran the building like a clock, to oversee the vacate process. He confirmed that the notice was legally enforceable. No grace period. No negotiation. I didn't even have to lift a finger. The whispers started 2 days in. One of my architect friends, Mia, texted me, "Is it true what I heard about Roth and Company? Are they really getting kicked out of Spring Street?" I just replied, "Yup." She didn't follow up. But word spread. Seattle's business community isn't massive. People talk. People connect dots. And when your firm gets evicted from a prime downtown location for breach of an ethics clause, people notice. I learned later that Callum had a meltdown the morning they got the follow-up letter. His assistant quit on the spot. 2 junior analysts walked out within 48 hours. Apparently, Lara had tried to spin the narrative, saying it was a sudden business decision and they were relocating to a more modern space. But when they were seen hauling their equipment into a temporary co-working space in Sodo next to a vape shop and a payday loan office, that story unraveled fast. The building itself felt lighter. Isn't that strange? A space can carry energy. The week after they moved out, I walked through the lobby. The security desk was empty. The walls, once filled with framed motivational posters and Roth and Company's slick branding, were bare. I stood in the corner of the suite where Lara used to post those cold, filtered Instagram stories. The kind that looked like they were in the middle of a fashion shoot instead of an office. There was a faint coffee stain on the carpet. A scuff on the wall where a chair had bumped too hard. Nothing else. Empty. Gone. Later that week, I ran into Callum. It wasn't planned. I was grabbing coffee at Elm Coffee Roasters, just off Pioneer Square. I was waiting for a client, scrolling through an email when I heard someone say my name, hesitant. "Mira?" I turned and there he was. He looked tired. Not in the usual, post-red-eye flight way. But drained. Hollow. His hair was disheveled. His eyes had that frantic gleam of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. He tried a smile. It didn't land. "Can we talk?" I said nothing. Just raised an eyebrow. He ran a hand through his hair, that old nervous tick. "I didn't think you'd go through with it," he said. "The lease thing. The building. You thought I wouldn't find out?" I finally said, quietly. He looked around like he didn't want people to hear. "I didn't expect it to hit this hard. You're really not letting it go." I actually laughed. A short, stunned sort of laugh. "Let it go? You erased me from our home like I was a clerical error, Callum." He looked guilty, but not sorry. "There's a difference." "I made mistakes," he said. "But this? This is a vendetta." "No," I said. "This is me finally holding the pen." He didn't know what to say to that. People like Callum never do when they lose control of the story. I walked away without another word. My coffee was ready. He didn't follow me. The next few weeks were quiet, which felt foreign at first. I was so used to the noise, the unraveling, the betrayal, the constant back and forth with lawyers and property managers. Now, I had mornings. I had silence. I had space. One afternoon, I met with Alan to review plans for relisting the vacated office suite. We sat in the conference room where Callum once hosted networking events, sipping tea while going over proposals. "We've already had 3 inquiries," Alan said. "Law firms. One from a tech startup, too. Prime real estate." He smiled, flipping through the folders. "You handled this whole situation with more grace than I've seen in years. Most people would have burned the place down." I shrugged. "I don't burn things. I build." And I did. Slowly. Quietly. Intentionally. My work was thriving. I took on a lead role in a sustainability-focused design project for the city. I got invited to speak at an industry summit in Vancouver. People I hadn't heard from in ages were reaching out, not out of pity, but out of respect. As for Callum and Lara? Word was they tried to sue. Unsuccessfully. The lease terms were airtight. The ethics clause was legitimate. Their lawyer dropped them. The co-working space booted them 3 months later for missed payments. But I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Because while they were unraveling, trying to rebuild what they thought they controlled, I was already 10 steps ahead, drawing blueprints for a future where they didn't exist. I didn't check Callum's social media, but people sent me screenshots. Lara had locked her Instagram, which had once been a curated mosaic of rooftop views, flat whites, and conference selfies. Gone. Just a blank profile picture and a bio that read "offline for a while." Callum's LinkedIn had turned into something of a ghost town, no posts, no updates. I could tell he was trying to regroup. Probably scraping for new funding, spinning a sanitized version of the collapse to potential investors. But I wasn't thinking about them as much anymore. Not because I'd moved on, but because I was finally moving with myself, not against the weight of him. My days changed. They slowed down and deepened. I moved out of the Queen and House, officially. I could have fought for it, and honestly, I might have won. But I didn't want a house that smelled like betrayal and overpriced cologne. I didn't want to open a cabinet and find Lara's lipstick print still faint on a wine glass. So, I sold my share. Forced Callum to buy me out at current market value, which, in Seattle's housing bubble, was no small chunk. My lawyer made sure of it. Every cent accounted for. I used that money to purchase a small, 3-story loft building in Capitol Hill. Not flashy. Just solid. Full of potential. I converted the top floor into my personal residence, an open-plan space with tall windows and exposed beams, and leased out the bottom 2 units to an art co-op and a small family-run bakery. Every morning, I'd walk past the scent of fresh bread and lavender syrup lattes on my way to the office upstairs. The owners, Mira and Estefan, yes, we shared a name, treated me like a friend, not a landlord. Sometimes, Estefan would slip me a cinnamon roll, by accident. Those little moments stitched me back together in places I didn't even know had torn. And then, one afternoon, Brenna called me. "This might interest you," she said. "Remember how I told you Callum and Lara might try to start a new firm?" I leaned back in my chair. "Let me guess. It didn't take." "Oh, it started," she said. "But they applied for a lease at a property owned by a group I've worked with before. One of the partners recognized your name. Asked if I thought they should do business with someone who pulled what Callum did. I didn't say anything. I didn't tell them what to do," she continued. "But I did forward the court documentation." I smiled. It was small. But it was real. Turns out, when your name gets around as someone who doesn't scream but dismantles quietly, people listen. Especially in tight-knit cities where real estate and reputation are both currency. Weeks later, I got another call, this time from a journalist working on a feature about women in architecture reshaping Seattle's downtown spaces. She wanted to talk about urban planning, adaptive reuse, how female-led design teams were bringing new energy to older buildings. I hesitated. I didn't want the story to become about him. But she didn't even know who he was. She'd heard about me. The projects. The designs. The way my firm had turned overlooked buildings into thriving community spaces. That night, I sat at my drafting table under the soft glow of a desk lamp, tracing over blueprints for a new mixed-use building we were designing in Beacon Hill. My Spotify was playing something low and instrumental, and outside, the city lights blinked like they were breathing. And then my phone buzzed again. Blocked number. I didn't answer. But I did let it go to voicemail. Later, I listened. It was Callum. His voice was tired. Slower than I remembered. "I know you won't pick up. I'm not asking you to. I wanted to say I didn't expect things to go this way. I didn't think you'd actually follow through. I thought," he paused. "You could hear traffic in the background. A car honked. I thought you'd fall apart without me." Another pause. "But you didn't. You built something. You're everywhere now. People talk about you in boardrooms. At city council meetings. And I can't escape it." Click. End of message. I didn't save it. Didn't need to. Because it wasn't a confession. It wasn't closure. It was just a ghost, fading back into the static of a life I no longer lived. I didn't respond to Callum's voicemail. Not then. Not later. Not ever. There was nothing in his voice I needed. No redemption. No real remorse. It was just the sound of a man watching the house of cards he built for himself tumble, slowly, deliberately, with no one left to help him pick them up. And I was too busy building the kind of life I never thought I'd be free enough to imagine. A few months after the eviction, I got word that Roth and Company had officially dissolved. Not with a bang, but with a sputter. Their last remaining client had pulled out. Lara was no longer listed as an employee. There were whispers that she tried to file an internal complaint against Callum, something about misused funds and misrepresentation of their relationship to investors. It was ironic. She'd helped him take everything from me, and in the end, she tried to take everything from him. Poetic, really. Callum ended up taking a consulting gig for a mid-tier investment firm out in Spokane. Not quite exile, but not exactly the center of the action either. Seattle had closed its doors on him, not because I told it to, but because reputation has a way of following you like an unpaid invoice. Meanwhile, I expanded. My firm, the one that had once been a side hustle with a few freelance contracts, was now one of the most sought-after architectural teams in the city for green and adaptive reuse projects. We got featured in an industry magazine, then invited to consult on revitalizing sections of the waterfront district. It wasn't just about the buildings. It was about breathing new life into things that were left for dead. Kind of like what I'd done with myself. One evening, about a year after the divorce, I hosted an open house in the very building Callum and Lara had once occupied. The former Roth and Company suite had been transformed into a co-working hub for women-owned businesses. Exposed brick, reclaimed wood accents, and a coffee station with beans from the local roaster downstairs. The place buzzed with conversation, ambition, and laughter, the kind of laughter that came from women who weren't competing with each other but building something together. That night, I stood near the window with a glass of wine, watching the lights flicker across the city, when a familiar voice interrupted my thoughts. "Can't believe what you've done with this place." I turned. And there he was. Callum. He looked older. Not just in the face, but in the way he stood. Like his posture had finally buckled under the weight of all his shortcuts. "I got an invite from someone on your team," he said. "Didn't realize it was your space until I got here." I just nodded, letting the silence stretch between us. "I heard about the new projects," he added. "Capitol Hill. Rainier Beach. You're kind of everywhere now." I didn't correct him. Didn't thank him. Just let him talk. "I guess I underestimated you," he said. I tilted my head, a calm smile forming. "You didn't underestimate me, Callum. You dismissed me." "That's not the same thing." He swallowed. Looked around at the women in the room, the walls he once claimed, now repainted and alive with energy he never cultivated. "I've been trying to get back on my feet," he said, almost to himself. "Things haven't really stuck." I said nothing. Just took a sip of my wine. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Do you ever think, maybe we could have figured it out if things were different?" I set my glass down. "No," I said simply. "Because if things were different, I wouldn't have had to become who I am now." He nodded, like he understood, but I don't think he ever truly would. Then I excused myself and walked away. I didn't look back. 6 months later, the Capitol Hill building was finally finished. 3 levels of retail, office, and rooftop garden space dedicated entirely to small businesses, majority women-led, BIPOC-owned, and LGBTQ+ inclusive. I named the building Roth Place. Not after Callum, but after myself. Because somewhere along the way, I realized I'd spent years handing over pieces of myself to keep a man like him comfortable. My name was the one thing he'd tried to erase first. So I made sure it was the one thing that would live on, carved into steel signage, etched into floor plans, stitched into every project file. He took my house, my ring, my dignity, for a moment. But I took back my voice, my name, and the ground beneath his feet.